Yeah, so Tony, thanks for this opportunity. My name is Mike Bostic, and I'm the current Chief of Police of the city of Calexico, and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to me. That's a fantastic question. I ask myself that all the time. I was in private industry. I left the LAPD 7 years ago, and I thought I was done with law enforcement. You know, I was kind of tired, beat up, worn out, and in the LAPD, I always had to handle all the scandals. It just seemed like one after another, and go in and clean up things and try to bring things back together. And it takes its toll on you, because when you're a police officer and you have to deal with police officers who choose not to follow the rules, it's not fun. And the organization is never happy with you, even though they know it's the right thing to do. There's still the internal, you know, you don't roll over on cops kind of thing. Even though they say it, they don't mean it, but they're not happy about it, you know. And it's just the nature of the culture of policing. They're very insulated. And so when I left the LAPD, my wife and I both retired at the same time. She's a retired LAPD officer after 20 years, and it was like, okay, I got enough's enough. You know, it was the most awesome career. I wanted to be a cop from the time I was 3 years old, after watching Adam 12 and Jack Webb, and kept telling my mom, I'm going to be an LA cop. I'm going to be one Adam 12. And she says, no, you're not. No, you're not, son. No, son, you're not going to be a cop. So it was very funny. My mother was a great lady, and she just, the day I retired, she said, thank God you're finally done with that. That's what my mother said, and she was in her 90s. And she said, thank God, Michael, you're finally done with that. So, you know, that's the way my mother felt about it. And I felt that way too. It was an awesome career, a great department, fantastic people I met along the way and are still friends of mine to this day, but it was time. So I'm in private industry. I've been there 7 years, and it's really about, you know, numbers and profit, and there's like no passion, and you're just making money is really all you're doing. And so I get this call from this strange guy that I've never met before in my life, named Richard Warren. And he says, hey, Mike, I need to talk to you. I said, okay, so who are you? What do you need to talk to me about? And he says, well, I want to talk to you about a police chief's job in the city of Calexico. Okay, so honesty now? I said, where the hell is Calexico? And I've lived here most of my life, and I didn't know where Calexico was. And I didn't mean it in a derogatory way. Honestly, I thought Calexico was a city in Mexico. So I knew I couldn't do that, you know, nor would I, you know, I wouldn't, you know, risk my life in Mexico. And so I said, where is that? And so he told me where it was and gave me a little explanation. And while he's doing it, I'm on Google Maps trying to figure out where Calexico's at. And, you know, my immediate reaction was, no way, no how, not going to happen, no. And I was like done with police work. So then he kept talking to me some more and telling me why he wanted to do it. And I thought, wow, this guy is really strange. This is never a city manager or someone that I've ever met that actually really wants to do the right thing and clean things up and give me the power I need to do it and all of that. So I'm not really believing him based upon phone calls. I'm still like, I'm not buying it, but at least I'll have a face-to-face meeting, because, you know, it always lives in your gut. You're always a cop no matter what when you're retired. And when someone bestows the honor of you of even asking you to be their chief, well, okay, you can't just blow people off for that, because just that in and of itself is an honor that someone would do that. And so I told my wife what I was going to do, and she says, oh, no, you don't. No, you're not taking a chief's job. I said, honey, I just want to go talk to the guy and pay respect to the guy that was willing to at least talk to me and find out what's going on there. Maybe I can help him find the right guy for the job. I know a lot of people. So fortunately, my wife bought that, even though already in my gut I'm thinking, wow, okay, maybe this could be a cool challenge. I am kind of done, you know. Uh-oh, now my wife's going to hear this on tape. I don't think she knows this part. So I come down and I talk to Richard, and we spend several hours together, and I meet the man, and I see the man, and I'm pretty good at measuring up people and figuring out, okay, is this guy for real, or am I being conned? And I've been conned a few times in my life, but this was clearly a man of integrity, a man of, you know, that really had a vision for the city and a passion, and a guy that really wanted to make changes in a city that needed changes. And I was impressed right away just listening to his heart. And then John Quinn came along, the finance director, and John shared his heart. And I'm looking at these two guys like, okay, so you do realize that I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white male that speaks very little Spanish. And we all kind of laughed together. We said, we get that, but that's not what this is about. we get that you care about the community, otherwise you wouldn't have been so successful in LA. And you know, LA, what am I kidding? It's a all minority city for the vast majority of the city, so I've always worked in those communities, but I kept thinking, wow, does he really realize that that's who I am, you know, and that some people are offended by that, you know? And he says, yeah, we understand that. So we just kept talking, and then, so I had some demands, and my demands were, are you really gonna let me do the right thing? Are you gonna let me run the department? Are you gonna let me make the decisions I need to make? Are you gonna keep the politicians from trying to interfere with managing a police department, which is the most dangerous thing that can happen in policing, is when politicians start tinkering in a police department. That's what leads to the mischief. So he promised me that he would deal with the council and do all of those things, and I'm going down my laundry list of all the things that I needed to be successful in Calexico, and he basically said, anything else? And I was like stunned. It was like, uh-oh, now I'm kind of like committed, because he's now, you know, offered to meet my demands of what I needed to run the Calexico Police Department. And I said, no. I said, that's about it. And now I'm realizing, okay, now how do I backpedal a little bit to go back and talk to my wife? So I just laid it out there and said, hey, so Richard, I might be interested in this, but I have a wife, and my wife has to give me up for several years to come down to Calexico, because my home and my family and my roots and my church and everything that surrounds me is in Long Beach, and so I will never give that up. That will always be my home. But I'm gonna have to move to Calexico for the duration of this, and my wife has to be willing to commute to come and see me. And he says, oh, okay, you want us to come talk to your wife too? I said, no, you don't need to talk to my wife. I'll just talk to her myself. And so I came home that night, and my wife and I had dinner, and she called me when I got done with the interview. Well, tell me what happened. I said, no, honey, let's do this face to face. Let's have dinner together. You're gonna do this, aren't you? I said, no, I have not made up my mind, honey. I said, no, I know you too well. You're already trying to figure out what you're gonna say to me to make this okay for you to do that. Honey, I'm not. I'm just tired. I'm on the freeway. It's typical LA traffic. I'm going 4 miles an hour. Let's just wait till I get home. So I came home, and like I'm doing with you, I'm just like sharing my vision with my wife, and you know, and I'm saying to her, Tony, Lori, Tony, I'm talking to you, Tony. So I'm saying to my wife, Lori, I'm saying, hey, this is what I would do, and here's how I do it, and I could do this, and I could do this, and all my LAPD experience, I've done this a million times. I know what to do, and I know there's a lot of good cops in that organization that are just dying for leadership, and it'll only take me a few months to turn that whole place around. And my wife looks at me like, you're really going to do this, aren't you? I said, it's up to you, honey. I'm not going to do this unless you're fully committed, because being away from home is going to be hard enough without knowing that you're not happy. And she just looked at me and said, how could I say no to that? That's what she said. Man, I got on the phone and I called Richard and said, okay, I'm in. And that's how it happened. Yeah. Everybody has a manual of policies and procedures, and a lot of them use the same one. It's made by a corporation called Calexico. And they, over the years, have developed, you know, kind of the state-of-the-art baseline rules and regulations for running a police department legally, you know, with the law, so that officers follow the law in the way that they should, and do all those things. And what I would say first is that clearly no one follows the rules, because no one's held them accountable to the rules. They just kind of do whatever they want to do, and that was kind of the direction from management. From, at least that's their view. Their view is there were no rules. And the different things I've seen, probably the first that was probably the most shocking to me, and I think I mentioned at the city council meeting the other night, was I had 2 lieutenants and the executive secretary, who are all the most important people to a chief of police of the organization. The lieutenants were assigned the field handling radio calls, and sergeants were running the police department. And nowhere in my career would that ever happen from anyone anywhere managing an organization. It's unheard of. It's like flipping the chain of command upside down. And then the executive secretary was asked to go count paper clips and stay out of everything and don't do nothing. And that's the person that holds my schedule together, keeps track of all my human resources stuff, is responsible for everything that to keep me on track, to make sure I'm taking care of business. And for some reason, management decided to move them out. And you can make up your own mind why they would do that, but as I described, there's living in the light and there's living in the dark. And my experience is when people are willing to do that, they're living in the dark and don't want people to know what they're doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing that. They would want all those people keenly involved in everything I do. My lieutenants are like my right-hand people. I want them involved in all the decisions I make and everything we do. So, you know, God forbid something should happen to me, or when I'm gone on vacation or I'm out of town for something, they got to run the place. And if they don't know every single thing I'm doing, how do they run it? They don't. My executive secretary needs to know every single place I'm going, who I'm meeting with, where I'm going to be, so anyone can call anytime, and they can, and the public has the right to know where I am and what I'm doing. Now, some things are confidential, obviously, but 99% of what I do on a daily basis, anyone ought to be able to know. So why would I hide that unless I was living in the dark, you know? So that was probably the most striking. No one following the rules and regulations. Rampant use of overtime with no approval. You know, people would just come in, work overtime, turn in a slip. Nobody would approve whether or not the overtime was legitimate. Take a look at what they did, and bam, they get paid. And you know, I got officers making, this is just an estimate, well over 150 grand a year with overtime. And yet there's some questions about how much I make, you know, and there's the question, how does a police officer do that, you know? Well, police officers do that when nobody's managing the system, because the way I look at overtime is everybody ought to have a fair shot at that. Now, there are some people that are in some key assignments where they're going to work a lot of overtime for a period of time. But over time, an officer shouldn't be able to double his salary on overtime and others get none. That's just common sense, right? And you'd expect it to be a fair system. It clearly is not. It's not fair to the citizens the way they spent money. Like I said, they spent over $1 million over their budget. So what does that mean? That means that all other city departments and other city services had to be cut for the rest of the citizens because the police department decided on its own it doesn't have to follow the rules and regulations of the city. And then they shifted the blame to the finance manager and said, it's his job to run the finances. That's not true. I'm the head general manager of the Calexico Police Department. I just happen to be called chief. And as I said to Richard that night and the council, if I spend $1 million over my budget, they should either fire me for incompetence or fire me for willfully spending money I didn't have the right to spend. I mean, that's just common sense in any organization in the world. Even in private industry, if you spend $1 million you don't have, you're gone, you know? So I those kinds of things I don't understand, and I just see it day after day after day. You know, we have police officers in Calexico inspecting buses, right? Well, everywhere I've ever seen or worked in the state, the California Highway Patrol does that, right? So we're at the meeting the other night, and you guys were there, and you probably heard the one gentleman speaking in Spanish, and my friends behind me were interpreting that he's running a bus business and he's being harassed all the time by the Calexico Police Department and his buses. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but we're looking into it. And then there's some accusations that, you know, that some members of the council have family that are running bus businesses and everything else, and I'm like, okay, that just says to me right there, like, wait a minute, why are we in that business in the first place? And whether or not they're doing anything wrong is not the issue. It just doesn't pass the smell test when the city's taken over the responsibility of the state and people are making accusations against the city council. I have to protect the city council and the city as well. First of all, my officers should never have been involved in, now that I've looked into it, bus inspections. They're not qualified to do them. They've never been trained. Or if they have been trained, their certification is not up to par from anything that I can find. And why would I allow police officers to take on that liability for the city when that's the state's role? So now those buses go out and get in an accident, and my uncertified, untrained police officers approve the buses. Look at the liability on the city and the taxpayers. There's no reason for that. So I've already talked to the CHP and given that back to the CHP and asked them to start doing the bus, you know, inspections in the city. And I think that's great to have the split. That's the honest, integrous way of doing it, where the state comes in and it isn't the local authorities being accused of collusion and all those things. It doesn't matter if it's true. It doesn't pass the smell test, and it shouldn't be done that way. So we've stopped that practice right away. We also have, I'm trying to figure out why we have so many overtime issues. So we have officers making so much money, like I mentioned, and then I start asking around and I find out we have officers spending hours and hours and hours on overtime on narcotics investigations, beyond the normal stuff they get on the street. So what they do is when they get information about narcotics, they arrest somebody, and then he wants to tell them about other dope dealers, and it kind of snowballs. Well, at that point, there's a group in the city called the Imperial Valley Narcotics Task Force, which all of us donate resources to. That information is supposed to go to them. That's why they're instituted, and then they do all the follow-ups outside of in the entire region, because narcotics dealers don't care if they're in Calexico or where they're at. They don't work within boundaries. So I got officers running all over Imperial Valley doing narcotics investigations. No wonder I have an overtime problem. They're using a lot of overtime to do that, and they're not working Calexico. So I'm thinking, okay, that stops today. So I met with my sergeant who's in charge of narcotics investigations and told him we're no longer in that business in this city. We will do it. We will enforce narcotics whenever we see it in the street, but when we get follow-ups, like everybody else in the Imperial Valley, it goes to the task force. That's where it should go. So there are already those accusing me of saying that I said we're going to ignore narcotics. I'm not. I'm giving it to the people who should do it, who are paid to do it, who have the equipment to do it, who have the supervision and the management set up to do it, and we don't have it in the Calexico Police Department. We're too small to handle that big an operation with all the temptations involved in drug investigation. We're just not equipped to do that. And I need my police officers back in Calexico working in Calexico. So that's just kind of a snippet of some of the things that I've just seen recently, and there's a few more, but it's just like the basics of policing. It's so simple how to do it, and yet it's just been completely ignored.
How are your qualifications going to allow them to succeed as police officers? How are you going to be a leader to them?
Well, number one, I've had the blessing of every management training known to police work in the LAPD. I had bosses that sent me to FBI Academy, the National Executive Institute for Chiefs of Police, and I wasn't one. I was at that time an assistant chief. I've been to the Senior Management Institute with PERF. I've been to command college. I have all the post certificates all the way up to executive. I've just had training throughout my career to prepare me for leadership, but more importantly, I've done it. Leading police officers is such an honor because they don't require much. When they put on the badge, they're very honorable people, and I know I have a lot of them in the Calexico Police Department. I have a lot of really honorable people because they're coming out of the woodwork now to tell me what's happening in Calexico, and I really appreciate that. There's been an awful lot of people in the Calexico Police Department who've been held down from telling the truth, and in some cases have been disciplined for telling the truth. And I'm actually in the process of unraveling some of that discipline that was clearly vindictive because they were whistleblowers, and including my lieutenants and my secretary. I mean, there's no way to describe it other than they're whistleblowers who are being tortured for wanting to live in the light in the Calexico Police Department, and that's why they were sent to patrol and told to sit in the corner and do nothing. And that liability alone is tremendous, but they're such quality people, they're not going to sue. They're just glad to have a leader. And they're already telling me they're thrilled. So I ran training at the LAPD several times in my career. So the value I bring is that there's nothing that I haven't done in law enforcement. There's nothing, well, I don't want to say nothing because cops are very creative when they choose to commit misconduct, but there's not much that's going to shock me because I've seen what, bad cops with a bad heart can do. And, but most of all, I'm fair. There's officers that are that in the process of what we're going to look at in the next several months have just, made some dumb mistakes, and, it wasn't of the heart. It wasn't like they went out to do anything wrong. And they'll see that that's what real leadership is ferreting out those who chose to violate the law on purpose. Very similar to a criminal. There's no difference. They just happen to be carrying a badge and a gun. They're still criminals. And then there's those that just make mistakes. Welcome to the real world. I've made mistakes and been disciplined in my career. And there's a distinct difference, and it's so obvious from all my years of experience. I'll be able to ferret through that. And I want to get them the training they need, and city manager has agreed to allow me to get the training they need. We get lots of money from asset forfeitures and things from the drug business we're tracking down and stuff with LA Impact and with all these programs we do. That money can go to training to get people trained, to get my supervisors trained, my managers trained, my police officers trained, get them the equipment they need. And when you do all that for them, they can't wait to follow you. because that's all they want. They want somebody to draw the line in the sand and then hold them accountable to that line in the sand. And that line in the sand is the policies and procedures of the Calexico Police Department. So I've now drawn it. And of course, the couple decided to test me in the first couple of days just to see, what they could get away with. And, we're dealing with it, but that's how you do it. You just have to be willing to stand up for what you believe in, and that's really simple. Police officers have an incredible power like no one else in government. Take life, take liberty, and take property. So I have no patience for people that do any of those three things outside the law or outside the policies of the department, because it's too powerful a position to not hold them accountable. Yeah, I can actually explain that. So when I retired from the LAPD, all of my benefits, medical, all of those things were paid for in my retirement, and I still have them in my retirement from the city of LA. So what I asked Mr. Warren to do was, I knew this scandal would come because I know cops are going to look for any reason when somebody comes in to deal with things to make up stories and do stuff behind the scenes. So I said, all I want is what the current chief makes plus the value of the benefits on top of it. The dirty little secret is it's not just the salary. The city pays anywhere from, I don't know what the number is, you'd have to ask the city manager, but anywhere from 60 to 80% above their salary in benefits. That's what it actually costs the city to pay a chief of police. So I fairly asked for exactly what he made, knowing this controversy would come. So we're very close to that. I mean, you can crunch the numbers, and I might be a little higher, a little lower, but that was my heart. I didn't want any more than him because I knew this controversy would come. Because whenever you bring in a new guy, they're going to try to find some way to derail him, especially a guy that comes in and wants to, shed light on what's going on in the department. So I'm making what the current chief is without the benefits that I've already earned for 34 years in the LAPD. So well, I can see how, if you want to play games and lie to the public, that's how you do it. You don't give them all the facts, and that's what they're doing. They're lying to the public. He gets a salary, but he also gets another 60 to 80%. I don't know what the exact percentage is, and retirement, sick leave, vacation, insurance, other benefits that they get. There's a whole array of benefits that they get, and it costs the city anywhere from 60 to 80% above the salary for every person on the department. And so when we calculated what I wanted, I could have asked for more, because frankly, I think I'm worth it for what I'm going to give to the city. But I knew about the controversy, and I didn't want it. So they made it anyway. And you notice they're doing it in the dark. I actually asked them if they had any issues with me in public and allowed them to ask questions. None of them had the courage to do that, so they chose the dark. I get that. I understand that. I'm pretty certain they would do that, and there will be more of that. So I'm hoping you'll come back to me, and when they give you those rumors, I'm always going to give you the truth, no matter what it is. Even if I'm embarrassed by it, oh well, I'm still going to tell you the truth, because that's the way it ought to be. Well, the beauty of the web is anybody gets to say anything, and they don't have to back up their facts. They don't have to stand up for who said it. So the best way I describe that is, we were talking earlier about the light and the dark. What is that all about? So we as human beings have a unique gift, and it's called a conscience, right? And with that conscience, we know when we're living in the light and we're living in the dark. When we choose to make decisions in our life, and we make them all day long, every day, something goes off inside and goes, well, I better not do that. That's not the right thing to do. Well, my experience of a lot of the people on the web, they're living in the dark, and they don't have the courage to come man to man and ask a question, or in a public setting, just ask me a question. So they choose the dark. Well, they do that because then they don't have to substantiate what they say with any truth. They don't have to come forward and be held accountable for what they say. And so, I've heard about them, and my kids read them. It's really funny. I said, guys, knock that off, 'cause they're just curious, and they live on the web, and so I said, I'm not really interested, because if someone isn't man or woman enough to come and ask me in a public place a question, their question's not worth answering. It's just the way I feel about it. And I live above board, and I'll tell the truth on any situation, and if they don't have the courage to come and act like adults and ask the question, let them deal with that. It's just kind of the way I look at it. You know, the game they're playing on the post certificate is that when you retire from law enforcement, after 5 years, when you come back, or if you come from out of state into the state of California, let's take Bill Bratton, who was the chief of police in New York, and he came to be the chief of police of the city of LA, or Willie Williams. They're appointed to the position of chief of police, and they're given a waiver from post to be the chief of police, and our city manager is already working on that request, and my background will be done on Wednesday. And I'm not worried about my background. There's nothing in my background that's bad, other than the things that are being made up. That, you know, that's just part of the game. But the truth is, I have all of those certificates all the way to executive management. They're still valid, but I have to go back through the background to get the approval from post to do that. So that's why I've chosen not to wear the badge and the uniform until I get that post certificate. It's just the right thing to do. You don't dishonor the badge until you actually have the post certificate. It's just a procedural thing, and it's just one more of those things that the people hiding in the dark are trying to find some way to keep me from coming into Calexico. I understand. You know what? If I was a cop and I was doing some of the things that some of the officers are being alleged of doing in here, I would be doing every slander, trash, immoral thing I could think of to come after the guy, and it just goes with the territory. So it's like, for me, it's it's water off a duck's back. It's just, it goes with the territory. If you got thin skin and you want to be an executive in police work, you got about 5 minutes to survive in this battle. So it's what it is. It's just people making up stories, and none of it's true. And Wednesday morning, I believe the background investigators, you can ask Mr. Warren about that, but I think they're coming in to share my background, then that's given to post, and then post gives me an exemption. I may have to go through some retraining, because even post has rules, policies, and procedures, and I have to follow them. So at some point I may have to do a little bit of retraining and do all of that, and it's no problem, I'll do it. It's just, it happens every day in California, and all of them know it, but it doesn't matter. That's not, the truth is not a good story on the web, you know? Yeah, the update is I have talked to the city manager. I kind of dumped that one on him in public session the other day, so he didn't know that one was coming. I literally saw that Tahoe about 20 minutes before I came across to go to the city council meeting. So it was like, I looked at my lieutenants and said, "You have to be kidding me," because it looks like a gangster mobster's car, and a police a sergeant is driving around in it, and it's so inappropriate I can't even describe it. It violates the law. You know, technically, under certain circumstances, there's a law that says it's okay to have tinted windows on police vehicles, but give me a break. Who are we hiding from? We're the cops. Why would I want to hide behind, it's even on my chief's car, the same hiding shade so people can't see who's in the car. Why would I not want anybody to see me in the car? The public ought to know that I'm there and be able to wave me down if they need help, they want to meet me. So now I'm in the process of destroying all that city money that got spent on shading to hide myself in the cars, you know, and so we're doing all that, and we're probably, most likely, Richard has asked me to look into selling the Suburban rather than, the fire chief at one point said, I need a new command vehicle so we can create a operations command thing and turn it into a, you know, really nice fire truck. But the more and more we think about it, you know, it symbolizes so much of some of the things I see going on here. We need to get rid of it, and so that's my intent. So, you know, to the public, I'd just like to say it truly is an honor to come here and be your chief of police, and the fire in my belly makes me feel like I'm 25 years old again, and I realize I'm not, but I do have that kind of energy and passion for the city. And when I came here, my initial commitment was like, wow, this is something that I'm equipped to do, and I can't wait to do it. And it was more about me, just to be honest with you, when I first got here. But now that I've met the police officers and seen the emotion behind their excitement to finally have some leadership, and how meeting them and feeling like they had been under siege for so long and there was no hope for them, and then meeting the community, and it was the same thing. Everybody who comes and sees me wants to tell me the story about what happened to them and everything else, and that passion. Also, I love this community. You know, 34 years in LA, I was a chief for 20, I think, or they're probably going to quote me on that, so I'm not sure how many years, but, you know, significant number of time. And nobody knew who I was. I could walk down the street, nobody in the city knew who I was. And in Calexico, everybody knows who I am and talks about my picture in the paper. And that's not about celebrity for me. I get it that's about you so much want a leader that cares about you, and I do. I look forward to serving you with truth and integrity, and I hope that all these political shenanigans end soon, and that the whole political leadership understands that Mr. Warren and I are committed to making this city one that everyone can be proud of, and a police department that's one of the best in Southern California. And it won't take long, because I have a lot of really good officers with really good hearts, and it's not going to take me long to create a great police department, and one that you respect as much as I do. So thank you for this opportunity.